The American Revolution, 1765 to 1783. The story of the American Revolution is not just the story of war and rebellion. It is the story of an idea, the idea that people have the right to govern themselves, that liberty is worth fighting for, and that even against impossible odds, freedom can prevail. In the mid-18th century, the 13 British colonies in North America were thriving. From the forests of New England to the plantations of the South, from the bustling port of Boston to the markets of Philadelphia, the colonies had grown prosperous under British rule. But beneath the surface of this success, tensions were beginning to rise. The colonists were proud of their English heritage and loyal to the British crown, yet they had begun to see themselves as something different. Not just English subjects, but Americans. They had built a new world across the ocean, with its own ways of living, trading, and governing. And when Britain began to tighten its control, the spirit of independence started to stir. The seeds of rebellion, 1765 to 1770. The trouble began after the costly 7 Years' War, known in America as the French and Indian War. Britain had emerged victorious, but the war had left the empire deeply in debt. To recover its finances, the British government decided that the American colonies should help pay the costs of their own defense. In 1765, Parliament passed the Stamp Act, a law that required colonists to buy special stamps for newspapers, legal documents, and other printed materials. It was the first direct tax imposed on the colonies, and it was met with immediate outrage. The colonists protested that they had no representation in Parliament, no voice in the decisions that affected them. Their cry became famous: "No taxation without representation." Across the colonies, resistance spread. Merchants boycotted British goods. Lawyers refused to use stamped paper. The Sons of Liberty, a secret organization of patriots, used protests and sometimes violence to intimidate British officials. In cities like Boston, effigies of tax collectors were hung from trees, and mobs forced many officials to resign. The outcry was so intense that Britain repealed the Stamp Act in 1766, but the victory was short-lived. The British Parliament soon passed new laws, the Townshend Acts, placing duties on imported goods such as glass, tea, paper, and paint. Once again, the colonists rebelled. They organized more boycotts, wrote pamphlets, and gave fiery speeches. Among the most powerful voices was that of Samuel Adams, who warned that British actions threatened the liberties of all Americans. Tensions boiled over on March 5, 1770, in what became known as the Boston Massacre. British soldiers, stationed in Boston to maintain order, opened fire on a crowd of angry colonists, killing 5 men. The event shocked the colonies and deepened their resentment toward British rule. The road to revolution, 1770 to 1775. After the Boston Massacre, a brief calm followed. The British repealed most of the Townshend duties, except for the one on tea. But rather than easing tensions, this single tax would soon spark a revolution. In 1773, Parliament passed the Tea Act, giving the struggling British East India Company a monopoly on tea sales in the colonies. It was seen not just as a commercial law, but as another attempt to assert control. The colonists refused to accept it. On the night of December 16, 1773, a group of men disguised as Mohawk Indians boarded British ships in Boston Harbor. They broke open chests of tea and dumped them into the cold waters below. This act of defiance became legendary, the Boston Tea Party. Britain responded harshly. In 1774, Parliament passed the Coercive Acts, known in America as the Intolerable Acts. These laws closed the port of Boston, restricted self-government in Massachusetts, and allowed British soldiers to be quartered in colonial homes. The colonies saw these acts as a direct attack on their rights. In response, they united as never before. That same year, representatives from 12 colonies met in Philadelphia at the First Continental Congress. They demanded the repeal of the Intolerable Acts and organized a colonial boycott of British goods. But King George III and Parliament refused to back down. And in the spring of 1775, the first shots of the Revolution were fired. The war begins, 1775 to 1776. In April 1775, British troops marched from Boston to seize colonial weapons stored in the town of Concord. Along the way, they were met by a small band of militia in the village of Lexington. A shot rang out. No one knows who fired it, but it became known as the shot heard round the world. The British advanced to Concord, but by the time they began their return to Boston, hundreds of colonial militia had gathered. They fired on the British from behind trees and stone walls. It was the beginning of the American Revolutionary War. As news of the battles spread, thousands of volunteers joined the colonial militias. Soon, these forces surrounded Boston, laying siege to the city. In June 1775, the two sides clashed again at the Battle of Bunker Hill. The British eventually captured the hill, but only after suffering heavy losses. It proved that the colonial forces, though inexperienced, could stand up to one of the most powerful armies in the world. Meanwhile, the Second Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia. The delegates, including George Washington, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin, and Thomas Jefferson, took bold steps. They appointed George Washington as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. They also began to act as a unified government, issuing currency, organizing supplies, and seeking foreign support. Still, many hoped for reconciliation. In July 1775, the Congress sent the Olive Branch Petition to King George III, expressing loyalty to the Crown, but asking for peace and redress of grievances. The king refused even to read it. Instead, he declared the colonies to be in open rebellion. By early 1776, the idea of complete independence had taken hold. Pamphlets like Thomas Paine's Common Sense spread the message that monarchy was tyranny and that America must break free. Paine's words electrified the colonies. The sun never shined on a cause of greater worth. Declaring independence, 1776. In the summer of 1776, the Continental Congress took the most daring step of all. A committee led by Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration of Independence, a document that would change history. Adopted on July 4, 1776, it proclaimed that all men are created equal and that they are endowed with unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It declared that governments derive their power from the consent of the governed, and that when a government becomes destructive, the people have the right to alter or abolish it. With the signing of the Declaration, the colonies officially became the United States of America. The Revolution was now a war for independence, the struggle for survival, 1776 to 1778. The Declaration inspired millions, but victory was far from certain. The British responded by sending massive forces to crush the rebellion. In the summer of 1776, they landed tens of thousands of troops in New York under General William Howe. Washington's army was outnumbered and outgunned. In a series of battles at Long Island, Harlem Heights, and White Plains, the Continental Army was pushed back. By the end of the year, Washington had retreated across New Jersey into Pennsylvania. Many thought the revolution was lost, but in one of the most daring moves of the war, Washington struck back. On Christmas night, 1776, he led his troops across the icy Delaware River and surprised the Hessian forces at Trenton. The victory revived American morale. In the following year, Washington fought a series of difficult battles at Princeton, Brandywine, and Germantown. Though often defeated, his army survived, and that survival kept the revolution alive. The turning point came in 1777 at the Battle of Saratoga in upstate New York. American forces under General Horatio Gates and Benedict Arnold defeated a large British army led by General Burgoyne. The victory convinced France that the American cause could succeed. In 1778, France formally entered the war as an ally of the United States, providing military aid, supplies, and, most importantly, a navy. The conflict had now become a global war, drawing in Spain and the Netherlands as well. The hard years, 1778 to 1781. The winter of 1777 to 1778 at Valley Forge tested the endurance of Washington's army. Thousands of soldiers suffered from hunger, disease, and cold. Yet through the training of Baron von Steuben, a Prussian officer, the army emerged stronger, more disciplined, and better prepared for the challenges ahead. Over the next few years, the war raged across the colonies. In the South, fierce fighting broke out as British forces captured Savannah and Charleston. But American partisans, led by men like Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox, harassed the enemy with guerrilla tactics. In 1781, British General Charles Cornwallis moved his army to Yorktown, Virginia. Washington saw an opportunity. With French troops under the Marquis de Lafayette and a French fleet under Admiral de Grasse, he surrounded Yorktown. After weeks of siege, Cornwallis surrendered on October 19, 1781. The victory at Yorktown effectively ended the war. The aftermath and legacy, 1783 and beyond. 2 years later, in 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed. Britain recognized the independence of the United States and ceded vast territories stretching to the Mississippi River. The American Revolution had succeeded, but its impact reached far beyond the battlefield. The revolution transformed political thought. It introduced the radical idea that governments exist to serve the people, not to rule them. It inspired movements for freedom around the world, in France, in Latin America, and beyond. At home, the new nation faced enormous challenges, creating a stable government, managing debts, and defining the meaning of liberty. The revolution did not bring equality for all. Enslaved Africans remained in bondage, and Native Americans suffered great losses, but it planted the seeds of change. The ideals of independence, democracy, and human rights would continue to grow and evolve through the centuries. Epilogue. The American Revolution was more than a war. It was a rebirth, the moment when a people decided to take destiny into their own hands. From the taverns of Boston to the fields of Yorktown, from the pens of Jefferson and Paine to the courage of Washington's soldiers, the revolution was a collective act of faith in a better world. It was the dawn of a new nation and the beginning of a great experiment, one that continues to this day. Freedom, after all, is not a gift. It is a struggle. And the story of the American Revolution reminds us that the fight for liberty, though costly, is always worth waging.